Hello, my name is Paul Majewski. I'm the Vice President of Meditation Australia, and it's my pleasure today, as part of the Common Ground Meditation in Australia online forum, to be interviewing Dr. Tyson Yunkaporta. Tyson is a senior lecturer in Indigenous knowledges at Deakin University and also the acclaimed author of Sand Talk. So welcome, Tyson.
How you going?
I'd like to start by asking you, in your view, what is meditation?
Well, it's I guess it's a technology that sort of sits between those kind of newly formed abstract spaces of psychology and spirituality, I suppose. But yeah, above all, it's a technology that humans have been using many thousands of years. Yeah, probably a lot longer than we would think. Although we probably never really called it anything, had to call it anything outside of our daily practice, because it's just basically it's how you be. A lot of the things that we do as meditations are actually more like just the state that a person would exist in if they were doing what they were patterned to do as the organism that we are. But I guess if you're inhabiting a civilization or a civilization's inhabiting you, you're kind of forced out of that state. And so you have to find, interesting little technologies to put you back into it.
What do you see as a place of meditation or contemplative practices within Indigenous knowledges?
Well, most of our cultural practices are things that will put you into that state, particularly if you have that ancestral connection. Although I've seen people, I've seen outsiders also come quite strongly into that space as well. But, pretty much most of our cultural practices, from just walking country to caring for country, crafting objects, weaving, painting, all the different things we do, preparation for ceremony itself, all of these things, dance, everything. Most of our cultural practices sort of bring you into that, into a kind of a peak state, and a more timeless state of mind, and and complete presence in that moment and in that activity. There's something about them, even if you're doing something as simple as just carving a pair of clapsticks, for example, as you find yourself just in that rhythm and connecting in that way. It's more of an ancestral state of mind, in which you're really feeling yourself in the presence of ancestors, and but also very profoundly connected into your real world here, your web of relationships, which you're drawing upon for knowledge. So you're not really, executive function, frontal lobing that activity. Your all your knowledge and your cognition is very much outside of yourself, in a haptic way, out into the places of knowledge that you're referencing, in the relations of knowledge, with all the people and kin that you're associated with. It sort of comes into that. A lot of our practices, even a lot of our interactions, will put you into that state. It's just a way of being, which is profoundly human. There are, of course, much more advanced states to achieve different forms of travel and communication and things like that, and healing and a lot of different ritual states, which are a lot more secret. I guess our tradition is different from other people like that. We don't have books about that, or monasteries or something set up to just pass that on to people. It's something that that people are selected for and taken through those those more advanced stages of knowing and being able to use this technology.
And I'll just bring you to Sand Talk itself. So when Indigenous people get together for Sand Talk, in your book, you say that some of the drawings involve special knowledge that we would say is not open source.
Yeah.
And you've just referred there as well that, there are certain kinds of knowledge that are appropriate for some people and not for other people. Can you tell us a bit more about, what qualifies people? How do you get to hear about the different knowledges?
Just through relation and obligation. You have to be in relation to a community, family, place, and you have to have a set of lifelong obligations that are established there before you can come into that knowledge. And that's not knowledge that sort of sits in the global knowledge economy either, so that's not something really that you pass on to other people. It's just, it's intensely local and internal sort of knowledges that you belong to. And it's sort of, it's not about self-improvement. There's not a focus on that. It's about a, communal collective improvement of the systems that you're inhabiting, and a continuation of that dreaming in that place. So, images are sacred. So, in a lot of these things with Sand Talk, in a lot of places, only women can do it and men can't do it. That's in some places. So there's always these restrictions, and sometimes it's gender, sometimes it's age. A lot of places, there's stuff that children can do just as games doing that. And then there's things that, anybody in the community sitting around can do. And a lot of it's passing on that story, but you do have to clear it away. It can't sit there for very long. You usually find with that day-to-day stuff, it's sort of done and then cleared away after a few minutes. You have to sweep the ground of that image. Because an image is, a part of the thing that it represents. It contains the spirit of that thing. And if that's something that's held or taken away, then you're taking spirit away from that dreaming. So things like the Southern Cross is not an image that we represent and replicate and take around the place. I know it's on the Australian flag, and there's a lot of tattoos and Nazi tattoos and stuff like that in Australia that have that Southern Cross, and that carries a particular meaning. But in our way, that would be like a curse to have that permanently on your body or on display around the place. That's a sacred image that you might do that Southern Cross in an important ceremony and take many hours to make that on the ground, much the same way as some traditions do those mandalas. But then that has to be cleared away immediately afterwards. It's a very sacred image and a very powerful dreaming, and you really don't want to mess with it. Yeah. So I don't know. There's I don't know, a lot of sort of recent, more kind of new age, kind of sanitized versions of meditation are very much removed from their cultural context, so that you don't have any obligations to the place or the community or to the tradition in which that sits, to that culture. And a lot of the spirit is sort of taken out of it, because it's a connective spirit where you're actually in a reciprocal obligation with that then, and then you have duties associated with it. But a lot of things are, borrowed from around the world, and they're kind of, airbrushed of all that stuff so that it can be an individual thing, a personal thing that you can do or not do as you please, and that's mostly associated with your personal growth and personal development. And I'm not saying that's wrong. It's just it's where you find the major departure from Indigenous and many old traditions in the world, and then the sort of largely Western practice of those things.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the importance of relatedness, because in your book, you use this Indigenous pronoun us too, and you're really inviting the reader to be part of a kinship pair with you in the discovery of this knowledge. Could you tell us something about the importance of relatedness?
Well, that's what you have to get right
in
first.
Indigenous practices.
You have to get that right first before you can really do a lot of self-work or progress in stages of esoteric knowledge and wisdom and all this kind of thing. Because if you don't take care of that, you end up with a very top-heavy kind of spirit, and the whole thing will fall over. You know what I mean? But that's your foundation, and you've got to put decades into it. So for me, it was about reaching out to people and making that us two connection, and making them intensely aware of that, but then all the other pairs that they belong to. And then, so then basically from that, it comes out fractally, because you have yourself, but then you have yourself in relation where there's no real separation between you and the other person. You're recognizing yourselves as one entity, and then you belong to quite a few of those until it becomes, okay, I belong to a lot of those in this exclusive group here. That's maybe all the same gender or age group or whatever, but then you're branching out further. Or who else am I in relation to beyond that? And then you've sort of, so you've got an us two, then you've got an us only, and then you've got an us all sort of sense. That's very broad and inclusive. And so you actually come out from those circles of identity, coming out from who you really are, which is nothing on your own. Nothing exists unless it's in relation. So you've really got to come into that web of relatedness, and you have to live in it and be in it. And just the act of living and being in it puts you in the right place. You're not going to have a messy mind. You're not going to have a messy life or a messy spirit. You'll be in a system of sort of flows, and so you'll be seriously being in that. That doesn't mean it's peaceful and tranquil and like it's not like that at all. It's quite often more like you're right in there, and it's real, and it's messy, but you're not, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
And it's a full expression of yourself, but it's from there that you can then start to branch out beyond that. I mean, what is beyond that? And you're in profound relation to your place and to the story of that place, the spirit of that place, any place where you are. And then you're realizing your connections to all the non-human entities in that place, and that takes you to another level. And then eventually you're coming into these levels where people are recognizing that you're in a space where you can learn this next thing. Someone might pass on the totemic magic from this thing to you, and you might come into a relational obligation with that story as well. And on it goes. And, as you go, the different duties that you have to perform for that, they'll require different kind of ritual states. But then at the same time, your day-to-day activities are putting you in a kind of a more zen-y kind of headspace anyway. So this is not an unfamiliar thing to you. And there are lots of things like that. It's I don't know, it's very exciting, but you can't just, and then that takes, a lifetime. It takes a long time to reach that stage of elderhood, and not everyone gets there where they can actually, develop and use a cosmic consciousness. You don't get to skip steps, like you can't be a fellow on his own in a cave achieving cosmic consciousness, because what would be the point of that? And you can't just get a belly button ring and get a few big serotonin hits or whatever with some breath work and go, oh, I'm a child of the universe. You're not a child of the universe. The universe doesn't want you. It's like, back off, go and connect with your family first and then come and see me.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's no, leap where you can suddenly become this junior bodhisattva out of nowhere, or even out of a couple of decades of practice, if you're not connecting, in land, place, community, family, all these things, and connecting quite profoundly. So it's sort of more of a way of life than, a practice that you sneak off on your own and do quietly somewhere. In our culture, we have it's a big no-no to do that. It's against the law to sneak off on your own and do things. Those people are regarded as highly suspicious, doing highly suspicious behavior, and they're probably off doing sorcery or something. And, if you take off on your own for an hour, off into the bushes there, and then you come back and then some kid gets sick, then people are going to put two and two together and go, oh, that was him, So, solitary behavior, solitary practice of any kind is usually frowned upon. Yeah.
I'd just ask you, in one of the parts of Sand Talk, you talk about observing a process. I think it's involving actually some robot vacuum cleaners. And
good on you.
You talk about how what seems like a quite random activity quite quickly evolves into what seems like a more ordered pattern. And I might draw a parallel here. Say when someone is a tracker, so they're highly skilled in observation. They're able to see things that most people can't see, and actually tell people a lot about a situation that most people couldn't make anything of. Something about how this observational process is informed from an Indigenous perspective.
It's informed by, you did link together two completely seemingly different things, but I think you can see there's something more there. It
Yeah, I'm
is
probably gonna have to ask that question again.
A knowledge and an understanding. No, it's there is a link there. It's that kind of that knowledge, that understanding, and that beingness within a pattern of creation, and an understanding of the emergence that occurs within a dynamic system that is self-organizing.
So we're talking about
so
identifying an underlying pattern. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, but it's also being that pattern. So if you're being it, then you know how to follow it. Mm-hmm. If you're in it and you're of it, then it's not something that you have to observe and then analyze data points and then make a prediction. You're in it and you're emergent within it. So if you're trying to track and anticipate the way something's moving within the system, but then you are profoundly connected as a pair, between that yourself and that thing you're tracking within the system, and you're not just observing it within the pair, but as recognizing that you're both part of a dynamic system and being directed, within that system along that pattern. You understand the pattern, you're moving with the pattern. Then there's this kind of, an outsider might look at, how that tracker works and see it as sort of almost magical. Like, how are they doing that? But it's really just being in and of that pattern, processing thousands of details at once, but not in your brain, but with your entire being, which is not just you. It's sort of branching out into that system, So you're feeling it in the same way as, mycelia would know for kilometers all around when an animal dies on the ground in one place. That information goes right through the mycelial network under the ground. You're feeling that in the same way, and understanding the patterns of what will occur and how things are moving through, sort of in real time, if that makes any sense. And I guess that's those patterns that that shape the flocking of birds, the schooling of fish, those sorts of things. And I guess that little thought experiment about the little vacuum cleaners, I'd love to have enough money one day or funding to run that experiment. But, you know, my hypothesis there is that, you know, if you let 20 of them loose on a floor in one space, that at first they'd be sort of chaotic, moving around, but then eventually you'd find them all moving in sync. And have they been programmed to do that? No. And they'd be making amazing patterns. So what is it that's moving them? It's not the code, you know, what is it? It's those patterns of creation that are sort of in everything, even, you know, a fabricated little AI slave like that. Yeah.
Some forms of meditation involve a certain level of trust that something good will emerge, or there'll be a natural movement towards harmony and improved function. What's your view about this notion?
Yeah, well, it just depends on your motivation. I mean, there are so many esoteric practices in our culture that it takes a lot of discipline to do, and a lot of removing yourself from your ego. And I often get tripped up in the sort of concentration side of things, you know, because you start to do something and, you know, it starts to happen, you know, and you have that thought comes into your mind like, oh, I'm doing it, and then like, no, I lost it. It's because you know, and a lot of meditators talk to me and they experience the same thing. It's like they just start to reach. It's like, yeah, I'm in a transcendental state. Like, nah, go on. Like as soon as it starts working, they're like, yip, yeah, and it goes. So it's being able to do it without being too desirous of your having the personal benefit from doing it is really tricky. It's really hard. I mean, I have heaps of trouble with that.
Okay, well, let me ask you then about your carvings, because you talk about your carvings quite a bit in Sand Talk, in both a storytelling and a contemplative sense. So when you're carving, what is this process for you?
Yeah, well, it's a process of sitting within all of your relations. You're sitting in that web of relations, and you're intensely aware of all of it at once, because you can't act upon that wood. You can't make that object without connecting with all the knowledge that goes into that. And to do that, you have to be connecting, you know, with the people who've given you that knowledge. And so, you know, just the act of sitting and holding that wood like this, just, you know, okay, so, and what's, you know, it's not just that. I mean, you've gone through a whole process of selecting the wood and finding it, and, you know, walking country for half a day to find it. And, you know, so there's a lot in that. So you're already in relation to that, and then the place where you got it, and the obligation to that tree to make it worthwhile. You cutting it in the first place. So you're in all this. So every cut is sort of coming into that, you know, into that story. And so you're drawing down from all of that. And then as you're making it, you're almost, you know, uploading to the object all of that knowledge, you know, that you're aware of is coming through the process that is you, and the process that is the carving is coming into that object in that way. And it'll be always there. Next, when you pick it up, you know, even years later, you'll be straight back there in that place, you know. I don't know if it's, I mean, you could call it a mnemonic device in a way, but it's so much more than that as well. It's, you know, you've put part of your cognition in there. And and so it carries a certain amount of knowledge and sentience and everything else. You know, you're really doing something quite sacred when you're doing that. And so for me, that's that's always the best way for me to be in that, because it's a process and you can't go back in it once you start. And I find it's easier if you're physically doing something and you're creating through that web of relations. I find it easier to ground myself, rather than the more esoteric business where I've got to be out of my head. Yeah. And one of those that I found hard, and I could pull it off because it was a matter of survival, is how to have a crocodile not get you. Is that you have to try and pull off this. It's almost a meditation. I mean, it's huge. You have to be able to walk right past it. So say, you're spearing fish and you're up to your ribs in the water, and then there's a sandbank that drops away and you see the crocodile drag marks going down to the water. So he's lying on that sandbank in the dark watching, and you're going to walk past him at some stage. And in that instant, you have to be aware of him, but not think about him at the same time, if that makes any sense. It's really tricky, like in language, how it's said, it makes sense. But then when it comes across in English, it doesn't make sense. It's like you have to know he's there, but at the moment that you go past, not know he's there while you do know he's there, if that makes any sense. You can't think of, if you think about him, if you think about him directly as you go past, you're like giving him permission to take you, but if you think about him and you're in relation to the crocodile, and at the same time you make sure that you're not explicitly thinking about him while you do that, then you can walk right past and he won't get you. And for me, that's the hardest one to do, because you realize all the noise that's in your head around, doubting yourself and all that sort of thing. And I guess that's why some people get bit. Yeah, it's tricky, but I always find it really, I find it really hard, just the ego stuff that comes up, proper narcissist. Sometimes it just, I go, yeah, I'm amazing, I'm doing this, and then it all goes away. Yeah.
Okay. And my last question to you, can you tell me something about your campfire meditation that you describe in Sand Talk, and which you have, you've done an audio version of that practice?
Yeah. It's just basically something to help people realize that their cognition is not just happening inside their brain. Yeah, if people can fully realize where their neural processes are occurring, which, as you can see in that one, it moves their awareness all through their mind, starting with moving it through their body. And they start to become quite aware that there are neural processes going on through their body, but then beyond their body, in the earth and in the sky. So it kind of, so you end up going on this plane first with your body there, but then you go down and up, and back. So you're actually getting this kind of more multidimensional idea of where your mind is and how profoundly that's in your closest relationships and with those that you love, so it kind of brings all those elements in and just helps people find that. And it doesn't suggest anything that you might do with it, but it just brings an awareness of that.
And where did it come from, that practice? How did you come up with it?
It was just grappling with the problem of how am I going to pass that concept onto people, and then sitting with a lot of young people, and like young people who needed to calm down a lot, and so trying to get them, walk them through those things. get them to understand about that, you know, how to do that, that sort of dream walk, you know, how to, you know, calm yourself and be able to put your awareness anywhere where you want to put it, you know, places you've been, but then also beyond that, there's really no limit to what you can do with that. And, you know, and it's not like you lose gains, there's aggregate gains and you can go back to the same place. You know, it doesn't really matter if you make a mistake in that, you can always get yourself back there pretty quick. And, you know, you can do as much or as little as you like with that one. So it's pretty simple, easy stuff, but, you know, lots of fun too.